we choose, there will be a loop attached to it. So we can't fully avoid them, but it's enough, because we have this limit thing here, it's enough to only follow small and smaller parts. So for the first circle we have, we're allowed to go along a little bit. The second, let's do, can you see this? Okay, so let's do that. So you're allowed to follow a path which follows this circle for this length. And in the second circle, we follow it a little less. And then the next one, we follow it even a little less. Next one, even a little less. So in the limit, this path that we followed along the circle, if we become smaller and smaller, the proportion we follow it, in the limit, we will only touch it at a point. Okay? So this chunk that we are on this loop becomes smaller and smaller depending on the size of the loop. So in the limit, it just gives you this point. So avoid loops from relations is not fully possible. Okay? But it's enough to avoid long stretches. I'll put it like that. That's enough. That's the nice magic of asymptotic cones. Everything finite or sublinear just disappears. Okay. So that's the task here. And there are 3 nice steps that you can take to do that. So I've broken it down and reshaped it into, first we look at G0, which in our case is just a free group on 2 generators. And we take R is a set of all relations in G infinity. Okay, so if we want to investigate this unbounded first group, we are given the group we started with, and we do already know what the set of relations we added along the way looks like. So we have this full set. And first observation. If G satisfies a graded small cancellation condition, then we count how many relations of a certain length we can have. So that's the first step. So if you have this graded small cancellation condition, which is a condition on the relations you have in your group, then there are, so we're counting, there are at most row relations of length row, where we choose row to be bigger than 10 to the 4, which it looks like a very strict, very big restriction, but actually it will turn out it is always bigger than 10 to the 8, so that's all fine. So there are not very many relations of a certain length. If you think about all the words of length row, which in 2 generators you have 2 to the row, order 2 to the row, then there are only row many which will become relations. So you look at the calligraph of G0. So this is now calligraph of G0, or better, calligraph of free group. That's a picture you hopefully all recognize. So you have your nice tree, and for the purpose of this talk, I'm going to draw it as rays. I'm going to reshape it a little bit, so this is a sketch for my talk. So you have stuff going away from the origin, like the other calligraph, and you don't have any loops. And now, use more colors. Let's see what we can actually see. Now I take the parts which, the words in this group, this free group, so we talk about words, which will become relations. So these are paths which are in, I'll call it R. So R is the set of words that will be relations. Now some which are not okay. Okay. But we have a free group, so there's lots of branching off going on. So there are lots of good paths. In every step, avoiding those, or large parts of it. Lots of branching off them. 1, 2, 3, 2. Okay, so these are lots of birds in XY, in the generating set of the free group, avoiding any W in R. Okay, so that's the trick here. And because you keep adding infinitely many relations, so R is an infinite set. So to find a ball, at some point you've got to cover everything, every direction going away. So what you have to do to make it still possible to avoid these large parts, it turns out it's enough to cut off one branch of this green tree. So the green structure here is obviously a tree from a free subgroup. Or in our case, we can just use the generating set. I'm going to say maybe later in a minute why I'm talking about free subgroups. So it's enough to chop off one part, one branch, every direction, and then cut a few off. Then the restricted tree, so the restricted directions here, will avoid all these relations. Okay, so that's blue now. Restricted tree avoids all W in R. Okay, so that's the magic. The small detail I didn't elaborate on is that I said it's enough to avoid large stretches of relations. And now suddenly I'm talking about all relations, so what I actually want is not the paths that are in R, paths which are part of a path in R. So I actually want large proportions of these words, and restricted trees avoiding all W in R. And instead of W in R, I actually want subwords of length N of W in R, where W has length N squared. Okay, so if we look back at the picture of this syntactic code, you're avoiding, pick this picture. So this stretch that you're allowed to go along has size, this is R, it has size, length square root of the length of the relation. Okay, so that's anything sublinear will do. It's nice to choose an exponent because then it matches up nicely with everything else with them. Okay, how many minutes? What did I say?
You have 20 seconds.
Oh, okay. Okay, then I'm going to tell you in 20 seconds what you do. So, how do you play this back to the group G infinity? You have your green tree in there, and then a small consolation magic comes in, which tells you that the green tree, or the blue tree actually, survives until G infinity. So if you start folding your Paley group out, this was just a free group, and if you start folding it up by adding these relations, you never touch anything of that blue structure. You never bend that together. It always remains that nice tree in there up until G infinity, until you have the torsion group. And then every path on the blue tree is a Morse geodesic. So that's it gives you a uniformly, a quasi-asymmetrical embedded uniform tree of Morse geodesics in that group, which in my current project we're using to exhibit the Poisson boundary. So you can use these Morse geodesics if you find them at Guerrero plate to determine the Poisson boundary of these groups, and also Adelaide parabolic groups where the asymptotic cones are not that well known. So that's the motivation for why they're also interesting, apart from the fact that they're nice. Thanks.
Questions?
Do you know if the geodesics are contracted?
Sorry?
Do you know if these geodesics are contracting?
Not all of them. I know that a lot of them are not, because if you have, even if you have this
Is
condition,
there one which is contracting?
there probably is one which is contracting, yes.
Can you prove that it's is there one that you can you prove that like one is contracting?
Not on the top of my head. I only started thinking about it 2 days ago. So.
I think it's not known if there is a group without three subgroups whose calligraph has a contracting geodesic.
So maybe I should think more about it. Yeah. Good suggestion, thanks.
So it's not known whether or not these groups are quasi-symmetric to groups with a Morse element.
Not as far as I know. That was the motivation for why we started looking for those Morse geodesics, because it was not known whether there is a torsion group even with Morse geodesics, because usually when you find Morse geodesics, it's the general approach is you find an infinite order element and you prove that the cyclic subgroup embedded in the calligraph gives you a Morse geodesic. In this case, it's similar. You have this tree and you follow it up, but it's not a Morse element.